information.
It is finished. Not thus saith the Lord, but thus saith the 2026 to 2027 budget debate. It is now closed. Minister Favour Williams opened the debate on March 10 and stood in Gordon House this afternoon, Tuesday, March 24, closing the books on weeks of parliamentary debate. She did it with precision. She dismantled the opposition's alternative budget line by line. She was thorough. She was prepared. She was confident. She revised a sugary drink tax, but she did not say one word about the oil. Nobody has. The International Energy Agency has said that this is the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. But the minister said not one word about the fact that the budget she just closed was built on oil at $60 a barrel in a world where oil is now at $100. This rebuilding budget after Hurricane Melissa built on stability, now facing a global volatility, oil prices rising, supply chains under pressure, and a reconstruction agenda that depends on both. We have three of the sharpest analytical minds in the region and beyond: an economist, a stockbroker and businessman, and a senior analyst from the Economist Intelligence Unit, one of the world's most respected forecasting institutions. Minister Williams spent her closing speech telling Jamaicans why the opposition's numbers don't work. But nobody in this debate has told Jamaicans what the government's numbers still do because of the global oil shocks. That is what this show is for. Does this budget hold? I'm Jody Ann Quarry, and this is Lead Story Prime. Inside Lead Story Prime tonight, we're going to take you through the numbers and take you through what has taken place. And to do that, inside Lead Story Prime, we have Amoy Harriet.
Thanks, Jody. Tonight we aren't debating politics. We're debating a clock. The budget was designed in one world. It was closed in another, and it will be executed in a third. That's not a government argument. That's not an opposition argument. That is a timing problem. Now, on March 10th, the Minister of Finance, Favour Williams, opened the budget debate in a world that, while strained, felt manageable. She stood at the wicket and assured Jamaica that the $6.8 billion in reserves were a fortress. She spoke extensively about macro stability. But tonight is March 24th. 14 days since that speech, the world has fractured. Now, while our parliament was debating who did what in the past, the IEA, the Global Authority on Energy, declared the current disruption the largest supply shock in the history of global oil markets. The budget was designed in a pre-shock environment. It was closed tonight in a post-shock reality, and it will be executed in a volatile, supply-constrained wilderness. Let's look at the math. The government's fiscal policy paper, the foundation of every dollar promised for schools, hospitals, and roads, is built on an assumption that oil will average $60 per barrel. Now, currently, West Texas oil prices are near $97. Brent crude is trading north of $110. With the Strait of Hormuz effectively restrained, analysts aren't asking if prices will hit 130. They're asking how long will it stay there. That's not a slight variance. That is a 60 to 80% pricing gap. And the significance is this. That assumption was not just for this year. It extends into the next. Now, for the purposes of this budget, that is now an assumption under pressure. Over the last 2 weeks, no speaker in Gordon House has addressed what this costs us per week, per month, or per year. Then there is NARA, the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority. The Prime Minister, Dr. Andrew Holness, has framed this as a command center for execution, 6 STEAM schools, a new KPH, the Sandy Gully restoration. But here's the forensic reality. The bill was only tabled 5 days ago. It has no CEO, it has no enacted legislation, and most importantly, it has no costed budget that accounts for the doubling of logistics and freight costs we've seen in the last 72 hours. Experts caution you can't fast-track reconstruction when the global supply chain for steel, cement, and fuel is in a literal chokehold. Now, NARA is being asked to build a 21st century Jamaica using a map of a world that no longer exists. Jamaica entered this budget cycle with macro stability, but we're entering implementation with external instability. The budget solves for discipline, but the world is now testing us for resilience. Tonight we ask, does this fiscal plan survive contact with reality? Or are we passing a budget that is dead on arrival? It's back to you, Jody.
Thank you, Amoy. Joining me tonight for the full hour, Keenan Faulkner, economist. Ryan Strawn, stockbroker and businessman. Ryan is also a former president of Generation 2000, the young professional arm of the Jamaica Labour Party. Tonight he's here as an analyst, not a party spokesperson. And we have with us Leon Lynn, senior analyst at the Economist Intelligence Unit, one of the world's leading economic forecasting and analysis institutions. Leon joins us tonight with an external lens that this conversation needs. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you, Jody.
Thanks so much. We have one question for this first segment before we get into the global shock. Let's start off. Before the war, Keenan, before the oil spike, on the numbers presented in February, was this a sound budget, yes or no?
Before the war, yes. I mean, we were tracking at about $60 to $70 per barrel, and nobody could have foreseen the extent to which oil would have gone.
So, a sound, solid budget, right?
I believe the numbers spoke to the reality that we're facing. We had a pattern of fiscal discipline, pattern of economic stability, prudence in our operations. So the budget was consistent with that. But then we had the events that occurred recently.
The events have overtaken us, but we're looking now at what we had initially. Leon Lynn, your organization, the Economist Intelligence Unit, wrote a report at the beginning of March on this. Before all that has happened now, was this a sound budget?
Yes, I have to agree with my colleagues. It was a sound budget. The oil prices were relatively stable, around 60 to 70. The conflict that erupted in the Middle East and Iran was not something that we could have foreseen or put in our baseline assumptions. But with that episode having materialized, we have adjusted our forecast now.
All right. What is that adjusted forecast then, Leon Lynn? Because having written that document at the beginning of March, you looked at some things in there. You said, by and large, it was a supportable document. But we now, on the 24th of March, have a very different global reality. What's the adjustment that you look at for Jamaica's budget?
Well, in general, historically, Jamaica's budget, in terms of the spending part, has been underspending. So it already had this leeway discussion, at least in the historical sense, that for the budget realization. But with the oil prices as it goes, and together with the revenue constraints caused by Hurricane Melissa last year, we are very concerned about the future of the fiscal position of Jamaica, but we think that it is still manageable, given that there is some leeway upon it. It is not going to be executed line by line. At least that's the assumption that we're going for. But with oil prices that we project in our baseline averaging around 110, 115, peaking maybe at 120. But in our baseline assumption that the conflict will not last until for the next month or so, it is still manageable if there is some cuts in some place or another.
All right. With those baseline assumptions now and the gap between where we were and where we are now, Keenan, first talk to me. What was the single strongest element you saw of the budget and the single weakest that you saw at the time that we had the budget laid before us in February? That document that allows us to figure out where we are.
So the strongest, I think, was really in its commitment to maintaining a positive fiscal trajectory. We saw that debt to GDP would have only risen to about 68% and then declined thereafter to 60% by 2029, 2030, which is what the adjusted fiscal rules require in these circumstances. So we saw that profile over the medium term, which I think was the strongest. The weakest, I would say, was probably the fact that capital expenditure now doubles, but we don't really get a clearer sense of the timelines for project execution and the specifics around project implementation.
And this is under broadly now the framework that we have on the NARA, the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority?
Yes, and for the next 4 years, capital expenditure will not go below 85 billion. In a single year, we normally spend somewhere between 50 and 60 billion. So we're proposing to almost double it, and if we can't execute fully in a year, how are we going to be sure that we're going to execute this much amount going forward?
All right, Ryan Strawn, strongest and weakest part of the budget as presented to the nation for you?
I particularly found the future prospect as far as it concerns infrastructure being the most appealing or the strongest part of it. We speak about the Black River Reconstruction.
So NARA, this idea of it is the strongest part for you?
Absolutely,
okay.
Because that represents transformation in terms of the economic prospects of the country and the capacity to earn and the capacity to attract new investors, the capacity to attract new revenues, new tax revenues. So it's augmenting the revenue profile of the country. Now, by extension, the ability now to produce that or to realize that investment is where I think we could see some weaknesses emerge, because a project delayed for an extended period then now will have a drag, and that would be where I would have wanted some more clarity. Though it's difficult to project the future, and this does come in line with somewhat what Keenan had said, I think to have an idea of when the respective things will be delivered or when we could expect, though we did hear 3 years or 3 to 5 years, it's a little clarity would have been helpful.
And let's listen now for a moment to Minister Favour Williams as she talks to us about the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority, something that she had not mentioned in her first speech. The Prime Minister spent a long time last Thursday discussing it. She now makes mention of it today.
Madam Speaker, the cornerstones to move us from resilience to resurgence have been set and driven by the builder himself, Prime Minister Andrew Holness. Jamaicans can expect a new and different Jamaica to unfold over the next 3 to 5 years, Madam Speaker, right before our very eyes. And it will be Black River rebuilding forward smarter and better. Hopewell and Lucy Bypass and Lucy Harbour development. Montego Bay revitalizing our tourism capital. Falmouth, a blueprint for climate resilient coastal communities. North-South Highway Extension Project. Port Antonio, birthplace of Caribbean tourism reimagined. St. Thomas Port, Port of Kingston, building the region's premier logistics hub, the government campus, National Hero Circle, Kingston Public Hospital, rebuilt to modern international standards with resilience, continuity of care, and disaster readiness embedded to its core.
So that was Favour Williams today on her feet in Gordon House closing the 2026-2027 budget debate. We're taking a break and coming back here inside Lead Story Prime.
The seed for potscapes was planted many years ago when by chance I acquired a few succulents and there was a gap in the market where persons were actually looking for a wide variety of succulents as well as guidance in succulent care. So I went through all the required steps to make the business a reality. The vision of Potscapes was to be an online plant store. To do so, we required an e-payment gateway. Sagicor Bank's e-payment system was very reliable and was a perfect fit for our business. My business blossomed when we established a storefront at 29 Upper Waterloo Road. My Sagicor business bankers supported me tremendously in the early stages and continue to do so. I received solid advice as how to navigate the business processes and to positively impact others through plants.
Can you do this?
We're back inside Lead Story Prime, and we're now in the territory this budget debate never entered: the investigation, the oil assumptions, the NARA funding paradox. Let's start off first with Leon Lynn. I want to start with you, and I want to start with your own organization's numbers on this, because the Economist Intelligence Unit published its assessment of Jamaica's budget on March 2. But since then, the International Energy Agency has now described what we're seeing as the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. If you're publishing that assessment tonight, once again, what would you advise Jamaica, based on what you've seen from other small, vulnerable economies, on what to do?
Well, yeah, so the assumptions that we are working on today is very, very different. With oil prices, fuel prices will go up, and that pretty much raises the prices for everything else. High cost of living will remain an issue. Although there was disinflation in the beginning of the year, that trend is likely going to reverse over the course of this year and the next. So for the fiscal position, the government really needs to take into account these new assumptions and adjust their spending plans. But in regards to the specific points that the budget proposes, the budget has regarding the tax revenues as well as NARA, there are some positive points around there. So it does install some investor confidence that the government is looking into new ways of raising revenue, and that installs confidence with investors that is still committed to fiscal consolidation, but without an adjustment, that confidence may erode soon.
From your vantage point, what are some of those upsides, especially since you mentioned NARA? That has been something that has been quite a mixed bag here, that there is a hope that it gets underway, even as legislation was laid for it in Parliament last Thursday. But there are also concerns that its oversight body, JAMROC, which is meant to replicate EPOC, the Economic Partnership Oversight Economic Program Oversight Committee, JAMROC has a problem because it actually has to deliver physical assets, physical schools, physical hospitals, in a way that EPOC just had to guard a financial program. Is that something that makes it more difficult?
Yes. So NARA, in our opinion, we are cautiously optimistic on NARA. So there is still a lot of uncertainties about how it will be organized and how it will be structured, how it will be managed and administrated. But point of it of reducing bureaucracy, streamlining projects, especially with when Hurricane Melissa hit, there were a lot of pledges from the IDB and other multilaterals for public-private partnerships. So we think that NARA would facilitate those projects and streamline and their execution and construction, especially when so much of Jamaica's infrastructure was hit.
Let me move to Ryan Strawn here, because if that investor lens is what we're looking at, let me borrow your eyes for a moment then. You're looking at Jamaica the way a lender or a rating-sensitive market participant looks at it. Post-hurricane reconstruction story. Negative real GDP growth projected. A capital budget the Independent Fiscal Commission called implausible. A fiscal framework that is suspended. And now an oil shock that has invalidated the central price assumption this budget was based on. Do you see fiscal discipline or a reconstruction story that is now structurally vulnerable to imported inflation, logistics disruption, and an execution risk?
Well, I actually believe that we will see a continuation of what has started to the extent that it can be controlled. So fiscal discipline will continue. We have the capital is in place for the rebuilding efforts. I think at this time, the concern may be the capacity to execute all of the outlined projects within a specific period of time. But if we're to go
that 3 to 5 year period that we're being told by the Prime Minister and Minister Favour Williams.
Yeah, because we have the risk, somewhat unique risk of being in a hurricane season 6 months of the year. So those are the factors that cannot be controlled. What is certain, however, is that the capital is there because of the prudent financial management. Then I'm not so concerned about running off the rails in that respect. For me, at this particular time, as an investor who, if I put myself in the shoes of an overseas investor, like the ratings agencies that have affirmed Jamaica's performance with positive outlooks.
So Standard & Poor's maintained our ratings. Fitch rating agency maintained our ratings. Yeah. Moody's actually said, oh, you did. We get to be a little more. We give you a little better rating. Those three major rating agencies affirming, Prime Minister Holness said on Thursday, the work that Jamaica had done in advance. Is that something that you think continues through this?
Absolutely. I think, though, if we're to speak specifically to the shock that we're seeing globally right now, it's kind of hard to project what the outcome will be, because even if we're talking about procuring oil, there's a lead time between executing a contract and it getting on our shores and then being priced. So, I'm sure economists can speak in greater detail to that, but I would imagine, like, if you think about Petrojam and the other major suppliers, they have storage. The question one may ask is, well, was the price they bought the inventory at the price they're selling at now, or are they set at a higher price? That's business. Business is business. But for right now, in terms of what we can control, I'm comfortable. Like everybody else, we're watching the oil situation, the supply situation in Iran. Do I think, or if you were to ask me to bet, do I think it would be so for 3 months? I don't believe so.
It might not be so, but we've heard from the International Energy Agency that even if it were to end soon, because of the destruction of now refining capacity in the Gulf states, the disruptions now, whole areas being taken offline, that we could be feeling this disruption for some time to come. Does that then need us to reassess what we prioritize in this rebuilding effort then? Maybe all that we had on our wish list after Hurricane Melissa just might not happen?
I wouldn't go that far. For to speak specifically to energy, there was a release recently speaking to a renewable energy thrust within the expansion of the electricity grid. So that may create some resilience within local shores also. But again, how long will it take for that to get on stream? The estimated spend is about $300 million. So we'll have to wait and see.
We'll have to wait and see. Dr. Chris Stokes, a development economist that we spoke with earlier today, also said this might be a time for us to look at things like that and move. I reminded him of Rahm Emanuel's quote, never waste a crisis. So that's certainly something that we can look at as well. Keenan Faulkner, let me pull you in here, though, because the amount of resources that we have is something that the minister at the start of the budget presentation says must be remembered by Jamaicans. For all that is going on, even if we're watching a world in March 10 that was changed as a result of now the war between the United States, Israel and Iran, and now spread to other Gulf countries, with 36 weeks of import cover as Jamaica's primary buffer, that net international reserves. 36 weeks though sounds good. Calculated against what per barrel though?
Well, you see, Jody, the net international reserves are calculated using the current value of imports. So our current value of imports is around $6 billion. What it does is that it insulates you more from the supply shock. So it doesn't really insulate from the price shock. It just simply enables you now to maintain your current demand and the current consumption for fuel. So without much disruption, you could still plausibly buy the same amounts of fuel to keep everything in the country running. But the prices will be obviously much higher. The prices will still filter into the rest of the economy. I don't want us to look at 36 weeks and say, oh, you know, we have 9 months cover for goods and services. There's also the IMF's ARA metric, assessing reserve adequacy. So it must be at a minimum of 100%. We are at 156. So we're just really 1.5 times as much as we need. So not precisely 3 times if you are measuring it by weeks, when 12 weeks is the minimum benchmark. It's just that the buffer, which has been prudently built over the last couple of years, I don't think you can have too much NIR. There has been discussion about what you could do with the opportunity
alternatives
cost of NIR.
As potential uses for it. You're saying keep it where it is?
No, you have to. I mean, especially given the fact that we are particularly vulnerable. So our vulnerability cannot be matched against a vulnerability of another country. So given our unique situation, it may be that we actually need higher NIR than we do right now.
Well, I spoke about the net international reserve and that cover that we had earlier today with development economist Dr. Chris Stokes. Let's take a quick listen.
If the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, which I can't imagine remaining closed for very much longer, what do I mean by very much longer? Another month, 2 months, 3 months, all right? But to the extent that it remains closed, make no mistake that not only will no oil be passing through there, 15 to 20% of the world's supplies, but the threat of the war means that the Gulf states themselves have been reducing production. So there is correctly an oil shock that is going to take some time to come over, and whether we get our oil from the West Texas price or we get it from or make some arrangements again, Venezuela, Guyana, and so on. The truth of the matter is that the supply of oil to the world will reduce, and at Economics 101, the price will go up. We'll be paying more. At one point, the Iranians were saying it's going to go up to $200 a barrel. So we are, without doubt, we are exposed, and that 6.8 billion will give us some comfort for a period of time, but it is not a permanent solution.
Not a permanent solution, echoing your words there, Keenan Faulkner, as we then hear what the net international reserves and that backup money, or savings, if you will do for us. But it is going to certainly mean that the assumptions that we have in our budget, the plans that we have, including big things like NARA, will have to be assessed. We'll take a quick break here inside Lead Story Prime and continue our discussion, because your money is on the line. Your hospitals, your schools, your resilience funding. We'll talk about if it's possible next.
Most people buy property and hope for the best. At Stella Global, we don't believe in hope. We believe in strategy. I'm Tiffany Gray. Join us March 27th through the 29th. Paradisiac Sip and See. This isn't just a tour. It's a wealth summit designed to save you thousands on your purchase. Meet our lenders, attorneys, and experts to learn how smart money invests in Jamaica. Ticket on sale at StellaGlobalRealty.com.
I'm me, the stylist, no scammer, no style me.
From the market to the farm to the office, money talk is everywhere. But are you making sense or nonsense? The Bank of Jamaica brings you common sense with BOJ, real stories, real laughs, and real lessons to help you protect, grow, and manage your money. Mattress savings,
At least my mattress, you charge me to sleep on it.
partner plan,
Remember last year we needed our payouts early, but Miss Pam gave it to her cousin first?
or a sketchy loan flyer.
Electrifying deals.
See why making the right financial choices is pure common sense. Brought to you by Bank of Jamaica, empowering everyday Jamaicans one episode at a time.
Grandpa, it's 2026. You can't keep hiding all your money in every single pocket forever.
Start your journey with a Jane Bank Small Business Loan with small business loans with as little as $10,000 and up to $4 million.
The time is 8:30.
We're continuing to then take a look at what it is that we can do here in Jamaica, because even if the fiscal framework holds, can we actually execute construction and reconstruction in this environment? Three angles tonight. The COVID supply parallel, tourism under pressure, and the CARICOM sovereignty gap. Let's start off first with Leanne, because during COVID-19, Jamaica's problem wasn't the price of anything. We wanted medication. We couldn't get it. It was a supply chain issue that we had to deal with. The International Energy Agency has now released 400 million barrels of emergency reserves. Their own analysis notes that this covers approximately 4 days of global consumption, or 20 days of normal Strait of Hormuz flows. Beyond price, is supply a concern? Because we talked about NIR, we talked about the money that we have to be able to buy, but is that a genuine risk that we might not be able to get?
It is a risk. What is happening in Iran and in the Middle East right now, a lot of the infrastructure used to produce and store and refine oil has been destroyed or damaged. So even if peace is achieved tonight, it will take many months to reconstruct all the infrastructure that was lost. So there is going to be some risk, and the price of, even if the peace is achieved today, prices will still remain high for a while. We're projecting that in our baseline that prices will peak around 115, 120, and then slightly taper down later in this year and towards next year. But there are more adverse scenarios where prices go even higher, from 130, 150, and stay higher for longer, depending on how long the conflict will sustain itself.
That's terrifying for people who remember COVID-19, who remember that we were happy to pay for vaccines here on the island, but we didn't have the opportunity to get any. Parson, Christian, and Picnic first. The idea that persons will take care of their home states first, especially as they're the ones facing these crises. Keenan, reconstruction is fuel intensive, though, because every single truck moving materials is going to need fuel. Every generator on a construction site is going to need fuel. Every shipment of building supplies coming into the country is going to need fuel. All of it requires energy at a price that is now 50 to 100% above what this budget assumed. And we just heard Leon there. Horrifically, we could be looking at even higher than that. If sustained at, let's say, $100 per barrel, it adds 20 to 30% to construction input costs. And what does that effectively do to the reconstruction budget Jamaica is working with?
I mean, it certainly inflates it. And, just given what we saw a while ago in terms of the supplies, yes, we have buffers, but that does not guarantee us the actual supply if it is that production capacity has been destroyed or otherwise attenuated. And so even though you have released a lot of reserves into the global supply, that is just very short term. So we have to really monitor the situation carefully. Costs to the government go up, fuel costs go up, utility costs go up. It could also be a drain on foreign exchange. And then it also means less foreign exchange for other things that you would normally do, like, for example, paying down on foreign currency debt. So this has, serious implications. And just using historically what oil shocks tend to do when the price of oil quadrupled or tripled overnight in the 1970s, and what that meant for the rest of that decade.
And we are being told by the IEA this surpasses it.
Wow, that's a scary thought to think about, Jody. I mean, you know, we really want the situation to normalize as quickly as possible. Yes, we're in a better position than we were back then to deal with it, but sometimes there are limits to that capacity.
And that must be so distressing for finance ministers across the world, including our own. You try so hard, you do so much, and still you have to deal with things coming out of left field. Ryan, the private sector is a key part of this partnership, and they're being asked to partner in Jamaica's reconstruction. They're being asked to do this through pension fund reform, through the Fast Jamaica investment pathway, through NARA procurement, saying, listen, hurry up and get it done. When you speak to the business and investor community, though, at what point does the combination of oil shock, negative GDP growth, suspended fiscal rules, and uncosted Reconstruction Authority, because NARA is... The bill was tabled on March 19. We don't yet know, though, how we're getting the KPH to 6 schools. The CEO has to write a list. First, we're being told of all the projects that were on the coming to come list before we do the things on the Melissa Needs Rebuilding list. All of that. Does it make Jamaica then a harder investment to sell with all of these things, plus these assumptions that we are still no clearer on in this moment?
Not at all. The pattern in the private sector has been towards increased investment, because the way to grow appreciably is through capital investment. So what we found is that most of the private sector standpoint I speak of, that you've seen with Sinkers and the like, with multi-billion-dollar expansions, that they retained great confidence in as a result of the anticipated outcomes. Do I think that could cause a pause at this juncture as long as uncertainty exists? I believe so. Do I think it's going to be prolonged? I don't. Because one thing with business persons, as we may have said off air, is that you never want to waste a crisis. And if there's an opportunity to get an asset that's distressed, you're best served buying it at the time. Otherwise, when it goes, it achieves market price. You know, it's more expensive.
So is Jamaica a potentially distressed asset at this time?
No, not at all. I mean, we're hearing the international community saying that our ratings have been affirmed and even, have been increased, or, they've improved. So I don't believe so at all. What we have is a temporary scenario that we need steady hands to steer us through, because anything that's too permanent or applied with a permanent element to it could prove to be a problem, because we can't react to a shock. In other words, in my estimation, if you do something permanent in response to a temporary scenario, you could have an undesirable outcome. So as best as possible, this has to be approached on a, whether it be periodic basis, whether monthly, quarterly, to then assess at that time.
So you think that perhaps what we're watching right now might not bear us out for the entire year, that this idea of looking at where we are right now, even if the time that the budget had been laid and where we are right now, the world has changed, you believe that during the year, though, that we have to execute it, we might be in a better place?
I think we could see transitions over time, yes. I would not say that I think as at March 24th, we would see things like this. June could be better, could be worse. That's just the nature of the world. As I mentioned, the hurricane season earlier. But ball for ball, apples to apples, do I think we will be in this dire scenario globally in 3 months? If you ask me to bet, I say it again, I would say no.
All right. Before I go to Keenan Faulkner here, let me play what Finance Minister Favour Williams said about the sugary drink tax. Because when asked questions about this, and we have been having this conversation about part of the tax package that had been laid by the government, with Favour Williams indicating that was part of the taxes as early as February, and then laying it before Parliament on March 10. She indicated that that was the position. Then you had back and forth, you had the manufacturers coming out, you even had the opposition saying that if the end result was for health and wellness, then it was important that the tax framework supported then manufacturers having less sugar in their drinks than having a blanket proposal to today, we heard the minister make that amendment, an amendment that is possible, and therefore questions arise as to why other amendments have not yet been made. Let's first listen to Minister Favour Williams.
Original announcement of a rate of 2 cents per milliliter was made for reasons of administrative simplicity. A volumetric tax is straightforward to calculate, to collect, and to verify. However, stakeholders pointed out, and we agreed, that a flat volume-based tax does not vary by sugar content and therefore does not distinguish between a low sugar and a high sugar product.
So it doesn't make that distinction, but the minister then went on to say, you know what? Here we go, though. Having had consultation with the people who've come back to me on this, we've made the amendment. Let's take a listen.
On non-alcoholic sweetened beverage will therefore be levied at a rate of 22 cents per gram of added sugar rather than on the volume of the beverage. Madam Speaker, this change will require some lead time for manufacturers, importers, and our tax administration to prepare. As a result, the SCT will go into effect on May 1, 2026 instead of April 1, as previously announced. Manufacturers and importers, the message is straightforward. Reduce the sugar in your products and the tax burden falls. The government is not seeking to harm a sector that employs thousands of Jamaicans. We're changing the incentive structure, and we believe the industry is fully capable of responding to it.
And that's Minister Favour Williams today in Parliament making a change to the sugary drink tax that had been debated after it had been announced in February, and now that announcement replicated on March 10. Keenan, sugary drink, there was a movement there. There's been discussion about this price as well. This $60 thing has been going on. None of the 5 speeches we heard in the debate. Minister Favour Williams opening the debate. Opposition spokesman on finance, Julian Robinson. Opposition leader Mark Golding, Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness, nor the minister today have opened their mouths and said anything about oil prices, even as the news everywhere has said there are oil price concerns. Is it disturbing? Should it be disturbing to Jamaicans to see us merrily going along? All is well. I know Ryan isn't concerned, but everybody else might be, that we aren't having any discussion in our parliament about this.
Yeah, I expected at least some amount of preliminary assessment that might have been done over the next 2 weeks between the opening speech and this closing speech. So I was a bit surprised. I mean, I know that we cannot fully account for what the effects might be, but if we're forward looking enough, we can see some of these things down the line. One of the things I said earlier was that I think this might necessitate some amount of targeted assistance and interventions for potentially the most vulnerable. And, you know, given the anticipated increase in the cost of living. But all of those can come in different supplementary budgets. I expect that this is a budget that will require a few supplementary budgets throughout the course of the year.
Could we have a supplementary budget in 30 days?
Not that quickly, but I mean within 3 months for sure.
Okay, within 3 months we could look at that. Well, Leon, Keenan, Ryan, we're going to take a quick break here inside Lead Story and chart the path forward next. Figuring out now what Jamaica does, as we don't live on a planet by ourselves. We're impacted by global shocks. We'll talk about that next inside Lead Story Prime.
March 28 at 6 p.m., John Mark Wigan presents his album launch, By Fire, live at the Jamaica College Auditorium. By Fire features the likes of Kevin Downswell, Rondell Positive, Alicia Taylor, Gilead Collective, Genesis Praise Squad, Audia Spencer Brown, Ryan Davis, Prince Saj. General tickets $4,000. Sponsored by JP St. Mary's, Credit Unions of Jamaica, Honey Bun, Chicken and Things, CVM, Love 101, Green Room Studios, Painted Lady Studios, Crosslinks Production, Imperium Gospel Limited. Proceeds support the Student Housing Initiative.
Tune in to Lead Story, weekdays at 6 p.m. Hosted by Jody Ann Quarry.
Brought to you by Horizon, a new loan product from Access Financial Services.
Every dream conquered is another dream gained. I land and I fly again like a jet plane. Headed straight in your direction. 'Cause I'm wiser, one step closer. I'm winning 'cause I work so hard. And the music keeps on playing, and the people that I say we are mash up the dance. Oh, what a feeling! Don't stop dreaming. Keep on believing in the power of the feeling. Whatever you want, take a chance. Song in your heart, step in your dance. You got a spark, don't fit it dark. Shine your lights
Thanks so much for staying with us inside Lead Story Prime. We're not just looking at problems. We're looking at charting the way forward. And I want to move to Leon here because you are going to help us use your eyes and your institution's eyes to help us figure out what we do going forward, because you have seen governments and institutions across the world. The Economist Institution, what is it? The Economist?
Intelligence
Unit. There you go. Intelligence Unit advises governments and institutions across the world. You are then in a position to help us compare and contrast. You've seen small oil importing economies navigate crises of this scale, some successfully, some not. In the immediate 30-day window, maybe even 60 days, what do you need to see from Jamaica, and what mistakes do you often see governments make that are in positions like this?
Well, in the short term, it's Jamaica really in the position to react to what is happening right now. So it's difficult to really point to what it's doing, but in regards to what it's doing in terms of the budget and trying to find new ways of raising revenues, as well as cutting some expenses and adjusting the budget as it goes with the new assumptions, it will be the way to go. In the long term, though, from especially what is signed in the budget, there's a lot of emphasis on diversification, especially towards digital technology services. I've seen countries going heavy into this industry, investing heavily into this industry. So, for example, Google just announced an investment of $500 million in Dominican Republic to transform it into a digital hub. So just across just your neighbor. So it's one of those things that economies are trying to diversify away, away from what they are usually relying on for revenue. So the Dominican Republic is just as tourist dependent as Jamaica. It is more diversified. It has created its free trade zone policies, I think 50 years ago now. So it has seen a lot of success in terms of that.
You're looking at, though, a country that also has some taxes on its wish list, and the EIU has specifically assessed our digital services tax, concluding that revenues from that measure will probably disappoint. The words on the report: the tax regime is murky and enforcement is lax. The government is counting on $4.5 billion coming out of that measure, though, over 2 years. Is that real revenue, and should we start moving to other things then?
No, indeed. The way that the digital services structure and industry is set up in Jamaica right now, it is a little bit murky. So that's why we cannot really ascertain that what they're expecting from those taxes will really materialize. But in terms of investing and trying to grow that sector, it would be something that would help Jamaica to become more resilient in the future for any other crises that they may face.
I think that resilience is going to be so important. Keenan, let me pull you in here because we're watching a Jamaica that is figuring out things as it go. The government doesn't need to wait for another budget cycle. You said, I can't get a new budget in 30 days. But in about 3 months, we can respond to this changed external environment. What, as we look forward, is a minimum credible fiscal adjustment that this Minister of Finance should make in the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days even longer, depending on what's going on there? And what instrument does she have available to make it so that those who are looking at oil prices can see the assumption of $6 and not go, this is wrong already?
At best, I think oil prices may have to be adjusted to maybe around $80 to $90. I think it will probably normalize to that. In the worst case scenario, it would be 110, 120. So 80 to 90 might be very safe. But one of the things I think that the minister would need to address coming out of the IFC's report was the
as the Independent Fiscal Commission, Jamaica's 1-year-old commission that now sits down, looks at these numbers and says if they're credible or not, and they had issued their report before the minister spoke in her budget presentation.
Right, is to get the level of inflation right. So of course we had projected it at somewhere around 9.5. It could still be possible, especially given the disruptions now in the Middle East. But regardless of whether it is that or something higher, getting it accurate is important in respect of now not overestimating revenues. So you don't want a case where you have now overestimated nominal GDP and then that results in fiscal overperformance and you expect to get more revenues but you don't get more revenues, because that's also a source of potential fiscal risk.
So not 9.5, where would you put that number?
I think it may be slightly above the range, perhaps somewhere between 6 and 8. Maybe won't reach the double digits yet, but we really don't know. These are all just
so not 9.5 inflation, but lower?
Maybe a little lower, but above our target range.
Okay, and so that helps us then figure out where we might be. Look forward with me, Ryan, here. Private sector confidence, because you're advising the business community tonight. What's one signal from the government in the next 30 days, maybe 60 or even 90 days, that you believe would maintain confidence in Jamaica's reconstruction story in the current environment, both global and domestic?
Continuity. A lot of plans have been laid that do have the capacity to drive the recovery, but those were in place before. For instance, the stated intention documented to have 50% of our energy needs be provided by renewables by 2030, which is 3 years and 9 months from now. And as I would have mentioned earlier, with the RFP about to go for the provision of, I think it's 200 megawatts. I don't remember the exact number, but that's going to be a substantial addition to the JPS, to the grid, the energy grid within the country.
Although the JPS has said that this sort of energy, renewable energy, cannot take us through a hurricane. So they're asking for us to be cautiously optimistic about this sort of thing.
But here's the reality. This is the world we're in now. And if we don't have renewables, because in everything there is weaknesses, opportunities, strengths, and threats, right? Strengths, weakness, opportunities, threats, is SWOT analysis. But that's the reality, is that if we're to rely solely on one energy source, we are going to have this dilemma face us before. And it's a dilemma we can't escape, because I do not believe the world will be powered solely by any one energy source. So the best we can do and communicate, and I say we, I mean Jamaica can communicate to the business sector, is that the plans that have been laid and communicated remain as is, because 30, 60 days is very short in the planning cycle. And as things progress, we will assess further. Supplementary estimates would suggest to me that there is a material shift required. A material shift is going to be based on a dynamic that's more intractable at that particular time. I think right now it's too transient for any firm decisions to be made, but there has to be careful observation given, because the illustration goes, it's very easy to turn a go fast boat, but to turn a cruise ship takes time.
All right. So if we have that in our minds, then we're certainly remembering that speed might not be possible in the environment that we're in, given all that's going on here. Let me give the final word now to all of you. Leon first, final word to Jamaicans as they're watching and looking at these budget assumptions, hoping for the best for the country, fearing the worst.
So, I mean, right now, what I think Jamaica really needs is predictability in this world full of uncertainty. So, I think that's part of what my colleagues have mentioned as well, having the continuity of policies and having a conservative and orthodox fiscal position and fiscal policies, so that it can maintain this credibility to weather any kind of other storm that may come.
And we don't want any other storms, but we're also vulnerable to earthquakes and all sorts of things. I can't deal with the excitement. Keenan, final word to you.
Sustainability. I think that is important to maintain because that feeds into credibility and predictability.
Sustainability. What's yours?
I don't have the fancy words of these erudite gentlemen, but the show must go on. We have to advance. We have to continue to roll out and execute the plans as laid before. There is a massive rebuilding that has to happen for quality of life to be restored, particularly in the West, and that must continue apace.
All right. Thanks to our guests tonight, Keenan Faulkner, economist, Ryan Strawn, stockbroker and businessman, and Lynn, senior analyst at the Economist Intelligence Unit. Here's my take. Minister Williams closes debate with a phrase: resilience to resurgence. Prime Minister Holness made reference to the same. This government built reserves that 3 years ago most economists said were impossible. It cut debt from 144% of GDP to 60% in a decade. It held the line through COVID, through Beryl, through Melissa. That's not rhetoric, that's a record. But tonight, this show has asked a question that the parliamentary record did not answer. Resurgence built on what? The minister listed 12 projects today. Black River, Falmouth, the North-South Highway, the Port of Kingston, a new Kingston Public Hospital. Every single one of those projects is fuel intensive. Every single one depends on materials that are imported. Every single one will be executed in an environment where the cost of energy has increased by 50 to 100% above what the budget assumed. And yet, the fiscal policy paper still says $60 a barrel. With all that we know now, that number doesn't seem right at all. This is a question of whether a plan built for one world can be executed in another. And that question requires an honest answer. The minister came to Parliament today to defend her budget against the opposition. What Jamaica needed her to defend it against was the world. 6 weeks, 5 speakers, 1 unanswered question. But we will all see if the budget holds. That is a story. I'm Jody Ann Quarry, and on behalf of the entire CVM production team, thank you for watching Lead Story Prime. Have a fantastic evening, and I hope you stay safe. Up next, Fan Central. Thanks, guys. It's a quick hour, I know.
Story Prime Budget Special, brought to you by.
Managing your investments with Sagicor is now easy as ever. Contact your wealth advisor to update your personal information.
Big Troop Fire! On March 28 at 6 p.m., John Mark Wigan presents his album launch, By Fire, live at the Jamaica College Auditorium. By Fire features the likes of Kevin Downswell, Rondell Positive, Alicia Taylor, Gilead Collective.
Let's delve deep into the issues. We'll take you beneath the surface.
Greetings and salutations. My name is Orville Higgins, and it's another edition of Fan Central.
Talking to the people at the heart of the top sporting stories. Hear from your favorite sportsmen and women and the administrators who work tirelessly to make it all happen. It's live sports talk.
I've written an entire article.
Yes.
Looking at all the major issues every Tuesday at 9 p.m. It's Fan Central.
Me and the style is no scam and style me.
From the market to the farm to the office, money talk is everywhere. But are you making sense or nonsense? The Bank of Jamaica brings you common sense with BOJ. Real stories, real laughs, and real lessons to help you protect, grow, and manage your money. Mattress savings.
At least my mattress will charge me for sleep on it.
Partner plan.
Remember last year we needed our payouts early, but Miss Pam gave it to her cousin first.
Or a sketchy loan flyer.
Electrifying deals.
See why making the right financial choices is pure common sense. Brought to you by Bank of Jamaica, empowering everyday Jamaicans one episode at a time.
Grandpa, it's 2026. You can't keep hiding all your money in every single pocket forever.